Have a good chat. Hello to all our live listeners. Hello. And to people on YouTube. I think this immediately goes out on YouTube and they don't clean this up. So this preamble ends up, saved forever, which is daunting. Icebreaker. Andy, what's your favourite breakfast?
Sausage. Yeah.
Just
Nice breakfast sausage.
just
Well,
a
and
sausage.
I like to make French omelets in the morning.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
What makes them French?
The technique and the shape and the fact that they're kind of like a little bit soft in the middle.
Is this one where they put it's half butter?
Not half, but there is a significant representation of butter in French omelets. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're shiny, as it were. Yeah. I certainly don't make them every morning, but yeah.
Do you prefer shiny foods? You only stick to the shinies, or do you go for like matte or other?
Well, I mean, specular reflection is always important in food, but not. I would say yes. I probably do prefer foods that are shiny if I really think about it.
A nice shiny apple. You're gonna prefer that over a dull.
I'm really picky
matte?
about my apples.
Are you
Really
picky?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only like there's a very small subset of varietals.
Oh, I thought you just meant you only like very small apples.
No.
No, I know this was an interesting quirk that I popped in your bio.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Okay. Well, ice broken. Right, with Andy. Tick that one off. Andy's ice has been broken.
And his
Alice.
apple preferences.
Same question. Breakfast.
No,
do I like shiny things?
Opposite question.
Opposite question. What do I like? Do I not like shiny food, or what do I like for dinner, or
What do you not?
or foods I don't
want
like?
for breakfast.
So many things, man. I'm such a picky eater. I could go on forever.
Are you?
Yeah. So first of all, anything sweet. I hate sweets. Anything with sugar in it. Anything that's like a pastry or sugary. Don't want it. I just want the most savoriest thing ever.
Yeah.
No sweets.
Salt. I mean, no,
Sometimes salt, not as salty, but more like umami kind of
Yeah.
flavor. Yeah.
Get that
I'm the same.
MSG.
Yeah, get the MSG. Just just give me a spoonful of that. That's probably good.
Have you ever had the tamago kake gohan, the Japanese egg and rice breakfast?
No, I don't eat eggs, so I don't know.
Ah.
But I do like kind of that kind of, I don't know, seasoning that is like very savory. Though. Like
Furikake.
with the yeah, with the seaweed and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Seaweed is very savory. Actually, have you ever put seaweed in oatmeal? That's delicious.
Really?
It's very different, but yeah.
Yeah.
It does have a kind of fishy thing going on. It's very salty, right? So it's a great umami, but also slightly fishy.
Or maybe fish or slightly seaweedy,
Yeah, okay.
they eat the seaweed.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And
Yeah.
now your oatmeal is also seaweedy.
Yeah, no,
Which is
also
better
good
than it
with
being fishy.
yeah, also good with nutritional yeast. That's another good one for the umami-ness. Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff.
One-
Ice broken with Alice. Smashed. This is good, isn't it,
Huzzah.
Chris? Yeah. Chris, we should break ice.
What?
It
Break
sounds
ice.
like go and have a drink or something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's break ice. Sounds like a saying.
It's too hot to bake bread, so you got to break ice.
Yeah.
Ah.
It'd be too cold to break ice. It's too cold to break ice.
It's like when
Well,
it's too
that's-
cold to snow, and you're like, oh, it can get too
Yeah.
cold to snow. That's kind of crazy.
I know.
I didn't know that was a thing. That's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, like in Minnesota and those like colder northern Midwest states, it can get too cold to snow.
Yeah, because the sky just freezes closed like water. Like the surface of water
I'm
freezes. It's like the same
I'm a
thing
West
happening at this
Coaster.
time.
I do
Well,
not know that weather exists.
I mean, I experienced that weather as a West Coaster. I mean, technically, I suppose, when I lived in Alaska.
Oh.
There would be, yeah, I know, I'm just Yeah, but there were we would have like a little bit of like a bunch of snow at the very end of like whatever passed for summer, and then just not a lot for the rest of it. Just it would all sit there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with like how much humidity you can actually have. You like the air just can't hold enough water to actually make snow happen. So
Yeah.
it's wild.
Well, I just thought it was like those same people that say, because this is what they tell you in the UK if you're hot, like you've been out running, you come back all red, come back in to your house and you're boiling hot. Your mum's like, do you know what you need? A cup of tea. A cup of tea when you're boiling hot.
Nice hot shower.
It's like, and they sound like, wow, it sticks with you because it's surprising, but it's also probably just a lot of misinformation in it.
I don't know. Maybe it helps you sweat more.
Yeah, could be that. Does that help? Maybe that's what they could. I don't, it could be true. For all I know, I haven't checked.
Yeah.
That's not how I operate. I like to just like
iced tea.
like the sound of it. We don't
Cup
really
of
do
iced tea.
much.
Yeah. Maybe like room temperature tea, because you shouldn't drink cold stuff if you're hot, because that like shocks your system a little bit from the inside.
Sounds delicious, doesn't it?
A
Nice
chef once
cup of-
told me that like the most thirst quenching thing is grapefruit juice, because
Right,
apparently
chef.
like that combination of bitter and nope. Sorry.
Good cat.
Yeah, apparently that's something about the bitter, like it's like just the right amount to like quench your thirst quickly. I don't know.
And that was a chef.
Yeah, one of my best friends is a chef.
Oh, no wonder you have.
Is that where you learned to make? Yeah, I was gonna say, is that where you learned about the French omelets?
No, those I learned by like failing over and over again until I'm watching like Jacques Pepin videos until I finally got it.
You keep making them and they come out like, oh no, this one's a Spanish omelette, this one's a
Right.
German omelette. You just can't get the French one.
It doesn't have that air of haughty superiority that I'm looking for in my breakfast.
Well, there you go. Not my words there, everybody. The words of Andy Walker. We'll play the theme tune, I think, and get going, shall we?
Sounds good.
Okay, here goes.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Hello and welcome to Go Time. I'm Matt Ryer. Today we're talking about building a world-class developer experience. You know it when you see it, when things just feel right, but it's more than just a pleasant UI or lipstick on a pig, which, by the way, is a saying. I haven't just come up with that myself and just said lipstick on a pig for the first time. That's already a thing. It's not just that, though. It matters. The developer experience really matters, and we're going to dig into why that is. Today we have a great panel. Kris, Brandow, my co-host. Hey Kris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I'm still getting over this cold, as you can hear in my voice. The word here. People say the word hero too easily, I think, these days. But to actually still do a podcast when you're on the tail end of what was quite a persistent little cough, a little cold. I let people decide themselves.
Yeah, whether that's heroic.
Yeah, exactly. That's up to them, not for me to say. Well, that other voice you just heard there, breaking the format, was Alice Merrick from the Go team. Hello, Alice.
Whoops.
Hello, Alice. Welcome
Hello.
to Go Time.
Thanks.
Alice, you were recently featured on Gophers Slack.
I was.
Game show.
That was
in
me.
Berlin.
I won.
You thrashed them, didn't you? You did really well.
It felt unfair. It felt unfair almost. I just know what Gophers say.
Yeah, exactly. We polled the audience, and really, Alice spends a lot of the time doing just that as well.
Yeah.
And was able to get into their minds.
I feel like that's an unfair advantage because your
Yeah.
job is literally
It is literally
understanding what
to, yeah, and do, but yeah, what they say and what they do, which is sometimes different.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, welcome back. Oh, and you've been on the Go team at Google for about 4 years, and you work on the developer experience, the user experience of Go.
Yeah, that is what I do. And I've worked on other developer tools and things in the past, and but for a while it's been Go. I've also worked a little bit on accessibility and things like that of developer tools. So I've been around. It's an area of interest for me.
Good. Well, it's an
Me
area of
too.
interest for this whole episode. And it's also
Yeah.
it's also an area of interest for Andy Walker, who is our other guest that joins us today. Hello, Andy.
Hello, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you back. You were just on an episode, weren't you?
Yeah. I've been making regular appearances. I'm like a bad penny. I always turn up.
Yeah. Well, you always
Yeah, I'm also kind of interested in that's it's not my area of expertise per se, although I do have some professional experience there as well. So I'm excited to talk about this stuff.
I feel like Andy is rocking the classic '80s manager at a tech company look with the rimmed glasses and the mustache, getting some
You might
office
need
space vibes.
He might need a tie, and
Yeah.
a pen
This is my Santa Fe
pocket
shirt.
protector.
Yeah, it's very cool. At least you need a tie, or at least a shirt that has a tie printed
Right,
onto it.
like printed on it.
Yeah,
That'd be
with
good.
a pocket protector.
Oh man.
Yeah. Otherwise, you've got these unsecure pockets. It's dangerous stuff. Okay, let's get into this then. What do we mean by a developer experience? What literally is that, and why does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about that if you want somebody to jump in on
Yes.
user
generally,
experience.
Alice. Just jump in. No need
Just
to-
jump in?
Yeah.
All
go
right.
for it.
All right, yeah. So typically, like user experiences is what you think about as the experience of the people who are using the thing that you're building, right? So maybe you're building a consumer end product or an enterprise kind of product, and you think of the people who are buying that or using that as your users, and maybe you're thinking about how easy it is for them to get something done. Maybe you're thinking about how productive they can be or how happy they are using it. And so that's typically what we think about when we think about UX. But when it comes to developer experience, sometimes we forget that developers are actually users too. You're using tools, that other people build for you or design for you. You're using languages and platforms, and there's a whole ecosystem around that. And so don't forget that even as a developer, you also have an experience of either building things and using tools and collaborating with other people, and that's just as important to getting things built.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make, because the whole Web 2.0 movement sold us on user experience having to be good, and actually sometimes you see products beat other products just because the experience is better. Doesn't even necessarily have as many features or whatever. In fact, sometimes that can be how they do it. But we've some, I guess, in the past neglected maybe developer, because we assume pro user, they can get into the command line and they can even look at the code if they're not sure. But I don't know, the times when I've had projects that have been successful, it's always been when we've paid particular attention to that developer experience from the very first, how they discover your product or project, how do they get it going with it, how much investment do they have to put in before they get some kind of payback from it, and how can we reduce that kind of stuff. The episode that Andy was on last time was about tools, and this kind of came up a lot, didn't it, Andy? Like the actual experience of using the tools often was what made us like them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the I think primary examples was some of the suite of command line tools from Charm, who pay particular attention to their design. The term that I keep finding myself using is something ergonomics, like developer ergonomics or like visual ergonomics. Things that more than just convey information, but do so in a comfortable and, I guess more importantly, intuitive way. and can kind of have ideally like some sort of multimodal, experience if at all possible. Yeah, that's really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, what do you mean a multimodal experience?
What I mean is basically, so we talked about this a little bit last time, but I read a while back that our brains are not as parallel as we would like them to be. They're really very serial, and so there's only kind of this small window of experience that like we're going to be like actively conscious of and like having discursive reasoning about at any one time, whereas there is this entire wide bandwidth kind of input of other senses, of other stimulus that nonetheless will shape our experience in ways that we may not be like actually consciously pondering at that time. And so as much of that as you can kind of take advantage of, I feel is like a good thing.
Yeah, so in tools, this is like, if there's already a standard pattern for something, go along with that pattern. You have the inertia of people already using it, and you get to then kind of take them with you, and you get a kind of head start. And I think a lot of the Unix tools, and like the way that you can pipe things together, like these kinds of, became very familiar. But I think it also applies in Go when you're writing APIs. Like that's a developer experience, of course, a Go interface and the thing you expose in your package. That is also a big part of developer experience. And yeah, how can you get that to be also as good and as slick and as simple and as clear as possible?
Yeah, and just to add more to, now I think we've kind of established what it is, why it's so important is, I mean, that's what allows you to build things at either at a speed that you need to, or with a high level of impact or satisfaction. Like you don't necessarily want all the developers in your organization to be unhappy or to feel like they can't accomplish the things they want to accomplish. And if your end product, like if your product is a developer tool, then for business purposes, it's also very important. If you have a poor any kind of poor UX, that's not going to, necessarily be the best selling tool out there or the best or the most used tool out there. So, yeah, just to add on.
I think for tools as well, especially like tools that developers use a lot, like even small changes to UIs or the API of it can have like massive effects that I think also are generally not accounted for by businesses well enough, where it's just like I think maybe a good example of this is how there's still like a huge number of people that use old.reddit.com for people that are still using Reddit. And it's because of like they just got so used to the way that everything worked in that flow that like the new one just doesn't work for them. And I think there's like lots of little examples of that with tools where it's like, oh, we like did some research and here's a new UI that's going to be like this much better. And everybody's like, oh no, this is actually like, it's going to mess me up. This is going to take me a long time to learn this. And it's like the trade-off just isn't as worth it.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting problem that you just brought up, called change aversion, which we don't have to go into a lot of detail now, but basically that is the notion that like anytime you change something, people are going to be averse or have negative feelings about it just because it's different. Even if it is better in some way, they are going to have some negative feelings about that. And it can be hard to tease apart whether or not it was because your design change was actually a poor design choice, or whether it's just like, well, it's just this like initial like change aversion and eventually people will get over it, or some people will get over it.
Yeah, it has a surprising source sometimes, I think, too. Like there's a bit of a perverse incentive to keep driving innovation and change forward, especially for like software that doesn't have like it's sad, I know, but like this is something I heard. My girlfriend works for an architecture software company, and a lot of that world of very like niche software, if they don't have a subscription model, especially, like they often feel like compelled to make these like big changes so that people will upgrade. And so then you get a lot of these like, oh, we researched this and like it's so streamlined now. And it's kind of funny to me because I do believe that there are or have been some, nearly perfect UIs in the past that just got, ruined by being rehashed,
So does this mean we're trapped? Like whichever version of your software that gets popular, are we trapped?
Yeah,
in
you
that
said you
one?
can never make any changes ever. No, I don't think so. But the thing is, you do have to be sensitive and you do have to make trade-offs. And one way that you can look at whether or not it was actually a good design choice is by looking at people who are new to that tool or product and comparing between, hey, are people who are new to this, do they think that this is, the best thing since, automatic sliced bread, or, or are they also struggling? Because if people who are new to it are struggling as much as people who are like, well, now I have to unlearn the old thing, then that's when you have problems.
So as somebody who's like a little bit like who's way more involved in this professionally than I am, that makes me kind of curious. Is there some sort of like decent or objective measure for like say time to fluency, right, that you can use in a case like that? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, you could absolutely set up a metric for success that was like, we need people to be able to start using this. They need to be able to get up and running in one day, and if people are meeting that, like if people can accomplish whatever goal that is in one day, then like, boom, then it's a success. But if it's taking people longer than that, then okay, we might need to rethink either our success metric or rethink our design. So, but yeah, I mean, is there a gold standard of like, oh, everyone should be able to start using a thing in 1 hour or 1 day or 1 month or 1 year? Nah, not really.
Right. I was just kind of
depends.
curious, like, if you'd run across anything like that, or like, I would imagine that if you've dealt with, these kind of experience and accessibility changes or overhauls before, there's got to be some kind of measure that, because if it can be very deflating, as a software developer, to spend a lot of time on something, workshop it even, and then come out with it, and people don't like the new experience. They want the old experience back. So like, it's or worse than deflating. It can mean that you lose buy-in or something.
Yeah,
like that. So
there are things you can do to make it a little easier.
Yeah, see, that's where we're going with this.
There are things that you can do to help people kind of adapt to whatever the new change is, right? Especially is because sometimes a change is necessary, especially if it's like there was a security issue here, right? Like we can't always have things remain the same. Sometimes things really do need to change, and
Like,
in
for
that
example,
case,
if they forgot to make the password box hide the actual password, and
yeah, no, that would be
spoke
real
it.
bad.
Instead, it spoke it out loud.
Yeah.
Just one of those classic bugs.
And I was like, oh, well, that's how I entered my password before. I would just say it out loud, and it would text to speech it for me or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, right. You're gonna break somebody's flow there. Yeah. I mean, and depending on what it is, like maybe you've got some tool that migrates your workflow from this tool to this tool or something, or maybe you have. I know. I see like kind of lots of that hasn't worked well for me in the past. Yeah. I mean, there are things that you can do that are like that. You can have documentation of like, here was the old way, here's the new way, here's why we changed it. You can also have like hey, try out the new way, but without deprecating the old way yet. And then it's like you give people like a really long, like, all right, you've got 1 year, you've got 6 months, you've got whatever, like, or you can go in between them to kind of explore, and while they're still maybe iterating on the new design or whatever. Like it doesn't always have to be like a very all right, now everyone was using version 2, now everyone must use version 3 tomorrow. Like that would be a disaster.
I feel like there's also like I guess to extend what you said there. I think there's a business perspective that often gets missed, where it's just like, even if we are building a new thing, we should be prepared if people don't like it and we need to keep the old thing alive. Like, I feel like that
Yeah.
happens a lot with like greenfield projects where it's like, this old thing is terrible, we're going to do this greenfield thing, it's going to be better, we're going to launch this new thing, and then you're still stuck having to maintain the old thing and run it for like 7 years because you didn't anticipate something. I feel like the same thing happens with a lot of user experiences or interfaces and things like that, where it's like, oh, we thought that we'd just be able to replace the whole thing, but we didn't actually understand our users enough and how they use our product to actually be able to pull off this migration or this change.
Right. Yeah, that's the importance of having a UX kind of baked into your process there, is so that, you know, you're not building a thing for no one.
Yeah. I think I have the opposite of change your version. Like, I love it when things change and it's hard again. I quite like hard things that I then have to spend time and kind of figure
So
out.
you must change your key bindings like every day then.
Well, I change my keyboard a lot. I do have now a new keyboard that I got. This is a Keychron Q10.
I built one of those.
Oh.
Q10.
Yeah, well, an Adisu style. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually have a Keychron as well.
What kinds of things do you like to see change? Because I imagine there are some that you wouldn't want to change.
Yeah, I like fonts to change. Love a different font. Gives a whole new meaning to the code. No, the code meaning stays the same, but it looks different, and I take it. Colors, changing the colors in the IDE.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a nice way to sort of, you know, freshen up your life. Some people have got, like, I don't know, interests that keeps their life interesting.
Yeah.
But if not, changing your IDE colors is a great way to. It's like a fresh lick of paint in your office. It's nice.
Yeah, it's kind of like fashion. Like, we wouldn't want to keep wearing the same things we wore in 1998.
Yeah, Andy.
Oh, you know, it's funny that you call me out here because, like, on the one hand, I rotate fonts like I rotate crops in a field, but like on the other, you know, I do. I mean, another thing that I mentioned the last time is that you know, my life was just changed forever when I learned that the default for, at least at the time, for MacBooks was to have non-integer scaling, and if you just ticked it up one, you could get, you know, crisper pixels again, which is like, but like I still miss like bitmap fonts, you know. It's just they're not really possible to get anymore. I tried to make my own, and to, you know, moderate success. But yeah, it's interesting. I do kind of still pine for that old sort of crispness in fonts, while at the same time, like, just basically continuously searching for like the perfect font for me.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a font episode.
Oh, I'm
yeah.
100% in.
Yeah, podcast episode on fonts. Yeah.
Or maybe like an episode about typography, because I was actually reading this article. I was down this rabbit hole of like Fediverse stuff. I was reading this one. I think it's like macwrite.com, I think is the website. But he had this post about how he made his website super duper fast. And one of the things he mentioned is that he at first started with web fonts, but then decided to go with system default fonts. And I was like, that sounds like a terrible idea. But then he's like, it's not the font that matters that much as the font matters, but not as much as the rest of the typography and all of the other changes that you want to make the thing more readable. And I was like, oh no, that's brilliant. Yeah, like, do all the stuff in CSS to make it so that it's a good reading experience, and then just use default fonts and like can make it so people can configure, you know, pretty web fonts if you want, or nicer web fonts. But I was like, that's a good piece of advice right there.
And it might be, if it makes it faster, then that might be a better experience.
Yeah, not having to load as much web font, and also not have the user experience of like the flash of like unstyled content, or like, oh, it's one font and then it shifts to another and it messes up your scroll position and all that. Oh, that sounds like real annoying. And it's like, it's just a system font, you don't got to worry about that. And system fonts these days are pretty good. Like, I mean, Helvetica is not a bad font, right? It's a pretty nice font, or I guess typeface. The font is whatever, pedantic, but it's a good typeface.
It's really about contrast, as I understand it. I was talking to, I started this project a while back to like make like a I guess like the most science-backed color scheme I could come up with. And I like reached out to a bunch of like ophthalmologists and basically I like looked up papers and, wrote to people, and I ended up getting a couple people to write me back, and they were like, look, it doesn't matter what your base color is. It matters how much contrast you have. Like, black text on white, white text on black. One may or may not be objectively better than the other, but not really. It's really just about like contrast, right? And after that, yeah, the WCAG guidelines and all that.
Yeah. I mean, there are some colors that aren't easily seen by people who are colorblind, and things like that. Some levels of visual acuity might require higher contrast, so you want to make sure you're ticking all the baselines. But after that, then it is kind of a matter of taste, and also a matter of fashion, because these things also change over time. Yeah.
Yeah, I always like to store my secrets. I always write it down in non-colorblind friendly colors just in case.
Yeah, you never know. 1 in 8 people won't be able to read it.
It's more secure than, whatever it is you're doing, Alice, with your secrets. I don't know what you're putting down.
I don't write mine down.
Ah, clever.
They're secret even to myself.
You don't even know them.
She knows them in her dreams, right? So she's
Yeah.
like,
It's a good place to store them, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't rely
But
on it. Yeah.
But so there are a couple things that we mentioned. I don't know if we want to move on to talking about like what actually makes a really good developer experience. There was something that we mentioned, is a good visual design, but you don't always have visual design, especially if you're using like maybe just a plain command line tool. But we talked about like speed. That was another thing, something that is fast. You want it to be responsive. You don't want to wait for something to just load to show you some animation. Like, ooh, look, it fades in and out or whatever. But yeah, I'm curious, any of your other thoughts about like what makes a good developer experience?
I think if it's one where you can guess and you generally make a good, you can make good guesses, I think that's great. I'm a big believer in documentation, but the goal of an interface for me is that you don't need the docs because it's clear, or you can guess in a safe way, and you've communicated that yes, you might be able to like click this delete thing, but you can undo it, or it puts it in somewhere else. Like if you can sort of show that, let people try things, and those kind of tactile experiences I like. The one that winds me up the most is the cookie pop-up, the annoying accept my cookies thing. It's so annoying, and it's like you've got like accept, reject. It's like sometimes, sometimes it's like I've run out of time. I was in a rush, and I got into some like advanced settings of the cookies thing now. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like,
yeah, it's you have the option to accept what the default, just accept all the cookies, whatever they want to give you, reject them all, or select which ones, and get in there.
that's a hostile user interface as far as I'm concerned. Like,
It really is. In my opinion, I think that something needs to change there about like what the default options are. Yeah.
I especially hate the ones that are gigantic, because sometimes I'll be like on my phone and I want to preview a link, and like in Safari you can just like hold down a link, it pops up. It's like, oh, okay, like I want to see the whole title for this article, so I'll hold it down. But then like the entire thing is blocked by this gigantic, for some reason, cookie consent form, and I'm like, why? Like, please stop. Like, I don't want to have to navigate fully. Like,
very deliberate.
Yeah, and like part of it is like a legal, issue. Is I think that is, why we have that.
Was it the EU? It was like California and the EU were like, oh, it started with just the cookie consent things, right? Where it's like, oh, you have to tell people it uses cookies. And I feel like every UX person was like, great, now you've just taught all the users to just randomly click OK on something to make it go away on the page. Like, this is terrible. And I was mad enough about that. And now there's this other thing that's like, oh, please, like, configure our ability to track you and whatnot. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I would like to say one more thing about good developer experience, to kind of pivot off of what Matt said and made me think of this. to me, yes, it's obviously like the interface that is 100% intuitive is best, but and kind of also related to APIs. There's like there is like with a good IDE, there is a kind of combined with good design, there is a kind of API ergonomics that like dovetails with documentation, right? So, you know, I know I need to do something with like this auth policy here. And so then I just type a dot. I do this, you know, all the time. And then if you get a good, like intelligent list of completions, you can very quickly make something quite complex that you've never seen before and understand what it does just by like little piecemeal docs as you kind of go along. To me, that is almost perfection, right? Like, and it's to me, it's actually even better than some of the AI autocomplete stuff because it sticks more. Like the tiny little steps that you have to go through, like just looking at documentation really quick, each section, like you remember more, it works better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I also like documentation that is interactive in some way. And I've built a few of these before myself, where we would teach you about this. There was a particular product, and it had an API, and it was an API. That was the tool. It was like a Docker container, and we would teach you about the API by letting you actually use it, and you sort of follow a story. So it's like a story told, and then it's like, okay, so we're gonna try this thing first with this empty box, and it doesn't know anything, and then we're gonna teach it something, and then we're gonna see that it's learned that, you know, and each of the steps you get back a payoff. So you invest a bit of time, and the deal was you've invested some time, we'll pay back with something fun or interesting, some kind of progress. And that worked out really well. We found that people would just go through the flow because it was fun and kind of enjoyable. And I think sometimes just tweaking language, like the way that you communicate and the tone that you communicate with people, can sometimes make a big difference. But we're building for an international audience, so it's tough to get that right, probably.
So it sounds like, was the API itself very usable? Like not just the like documentation, but was the API itself?
Yeah, well, in a way, this was designed from the perspective of this story, and it's a bit like how TDD can sometimes drive your design, often drives your design of what your package is and what you're exposing. Almost like the document-driven thing. This was the way that people would learn about this API, informed what the API design was, and I think that's also, it's a bit of, you know, applying sort of UX principles generally. Like think about the user, what are they doing? Like, what are they feeling at this time as well? I'm working on an incident tool at the moment in Grafana Labs, and incidents are a time when people are really stressed out. So we have to deliberately be a much simpler tool to use than some of the other pro tools that Grafana has. And it's really about understanding that what people are doing, what they're feeling at that moment. That sounds like I think when I started my career, thinking about like how people are feeling using the software would have sounded a bit like I wouldn't have perhaps respected it as much as like it's paramount now. It's like if you can cheer people up, if you can solve their problem, like this is like we get joy from this kind of stuff. It's fun.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of idea is what made Swagger, now OpenAPI, so popular. Is it was like, well, here's really good looking documentation that you can just run. And I think there's a lot of advantages to that sort of thing if you do it right. I think a lot of people do all of it very poorly. Like they'll give you a specification that doesn't even work. It'll be like, it doesn't run through the validator properly. But I think when you do that well, it does feel like this like easy experience getting acquainted with even what can be a complex API, because it's just like, oh, here's some examples, here's what to expect, and it kind of like guides you to all of the information you need to provide to someone to actually be able to use the thing.
Yeah, structured representation of information, you know, can go quite a long way. In at least in aiding, you know, understanding.
Yeah. Andy, I can't imagine what your life's like.
What do you mean?
just like you going about your day doing normal things. I can't imagine it.
Yeah, well, yeah, neither can the people that live with me.
No, but just imagine Andy just like, oh, I'm going to go into this bookshop and then I'm going to go into a coffee shop and just do some normal things. Doesn't compute for work for some reason.
No, I'm like always like, I guess for me there's like this underlying sense that, you know, I could be doing better, or like, I don't know, I can't stop thinking about like the you know, both like the intersection of between like, you know, the way that we have built the world and the way that like maybe, and all of this like stuff that we're kind of like hardwired to take in, and how to like, you know, pay attention to that and use that kind of heuristic stuff a little bit better. Yeah, it's really interesting to me. Sorry.
No, yeah. Well, I think that's like using data like to make these decisions is a very interesting point. And Alice, what are some of the things that you hear the most about Go's user experience and developer experience?
Well, I mean, lots. Where do I begin? I mean, I could talk about like reasons what people like about Go. You know, people say it's very simple, it's easy to learn. You know, it's easy to deploy everywhere. It's, you know, single executable. I can put it, you know, like it's just easy. Some people also like, you know, really are into GoFumped. And the fact that, hey, actually, it's really easy to maintain this and share, like, have a shared code base with somebody when all our code looks the same. Yeah.
Right.
So the language, and then also like the tooling, you know, those are some of the things that we hear about, like as far as you know, really good experiences are going. So.
Yeah.
If you have more and more to gush about on the Go developer experience, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I do think it does a good job. When I learned it, it was all very lo-fi. It felt like a kind of small open source project. So it was like static sites, and actually all that stuff in itself was also very simplistic, which mirrored really Go and kind of was what attracted me to it, honestly. I think the fact that we have the in-browser playground, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I want to hear about that. I am so fascinated into how people use this and why, because something I found out recently is that actually a lot of the traffic to the go.dev website is for that playground. And I have very little understanding of what people are using it for, but I have heard that people use it to like possibly like share code snippets with other people. But like, how do you use it in your like day-to-day? You know, is it something you learn to use or experiment, or like what's going on when you're using that?
Yeah, well, for me, excuse me. Sorry, editors will fix that. I just coughed. Sorry. No, it's not a free for all, Andy. No, of course you can. Anyone else want to go before we?
If we're having a cough party.
I love how quick you tried to get yours in as well at the end. It's like it was just it was all winding down, wasn't it? And you were like, oh, "That's the fastest cough I've ever
Sneezes? Any sneezes?
seen." Yeah,
Could do some sneeze.
it's like having a duel with sneezes. What said?
I'm okay.
You were saying about how much you love the playground and how you use it.
Yeah, I actually use it to sketch out ideas sometimes when I'm talking about things, and sometimes that can be collaborative and sometimes not. It's quicker to open the playground than it is to create a file and go and edit it, especially if I've got already tooling and IDEs and stuff around. I can't just go and easily create a file in there and make a mess, because then it's like, oh, it doesn't build anymore.
Isn't it like amazing too? Like I use it all the time, and I've deliberately tried not to. Like I've tried to like set it up in such a way that I don't do that, because like if you really
like
think
put an
about
adult
it,
filter block on it or something. How have you stopped yourself from using
yeah.
it?
I mean, if you
Trying to
really
wean
think about it,
yourself
it's like a completely different experience. Like it doesn't do, you know, any kind of, I mean, it doesn't bother me, but it doesn't do any kind of syntax highlighting. It looks, I mean, it's basically Acme. It doesn't do auto indent until you like save it or run it, right? And it's a completely like very bare bones experience. And so like I've like actively tried to like, okay, how do I get this? Like, why do I like this? And how do I get it like in a way that's not, that's similar to what I'm actually doing? And I still, end up using it for like quick one-offs, or like if I'm brain farting about syntax or whatever, like I'll just open the site, type things in. I don't even care that it's not getting indented. I'm like, it'll be fine, right? And then, but I think you're right. Like basically the ability to more or less click a button and then that's it, right? It will run, and if there's something wrong with it, you'll see it. Is pretty valuable. And like, of course the reproducibility too is nice, but like it's fast, like you say, and it's just there.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the equivalent of like a scratch pad. So it's like, sometimes you're like working on something, you just need like a little scratch piece of paper to write something down on. And like, I feel like if you wanted to do that locally, you would have to like commit to like a file somewhere you have to put someplace, and that just like pulls you out of whatever you were just trying to do. So you gotta, where am I gonna go put this? Oh, I gotta name it properly. How do I run this thing again? So you gotta like go run it, especially if you have a folder where you put all these things. Like, oh, gotta go run this specific file. But with the playground, it's just like, no, I just open it up, type play.whatever, and then I'm off to the races, and I can run it, and then I can go back to whatever I was doing. It has a very tight loop, and I can just throw it away when I'm done, and there's not this commitment that I would have with, something else that I want to use.
And it drops you right into main, right? Like just everything's like you're ready to go. You're just there, right? There's like you don't even have to type a skeleton or anything.
I don't even have to name the thing. It's just
yeah.
So Andy, you mentioned that you tried not to use Playground.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, why not? It sounds like it's great.
No, it is. It's just that like it does have shortcomings, right? Like the fact that it doesn't, first of all, if it's more than just like exploratory, like if I'm dashing off a syntax idea or like, something involving like the rules of the language that I want to like mess around with or test. If it involves like a library, if it involves anything like that, then it takes longer. Like if I want to do an example that uses even more than one file, anything like that, or even an example that like crosses package boundaries, there's this kind of abstruse syntax that you have to use to do that kind of thing. And so that's when I've wanted something similar, but there's really nothing that does it quite the same way.
I'm curious, is there anything about it being in the browser itself that is vital to the experience? Or if you could do this like locally in your IDE, like what if what if it was easy to just create a piece of scratch paper, as you will, like in your favorite editor? Would you do that instead?
Yes. As long as it had some kind of even if somewhat limited persistence, right? Because there is a mode of working, right? It's the coding equivalent of having like being like the novelist who has a bunch of sticky pads or whatever, right? Like there is this mode of working like that, and you need the kind of permanence of it there to like refer to. But yes, I absolutely would.
Yeah, I think that's. But the nice thing about the playground is that you can, if you want to, save it and put it somewhere. But yeah, I think like you kind of hit the nail right in the head there, Alice, because I was just thinking about how it'd be a cool thing to build of a tool that's like literally like a scratchpad or whatever. That is this thing where it's just like, oh, I want to just sketch something out real quick, and it lets you do that quick. Like I'm just roughing out some syntax, or I'm just like trying to figure out what I mean here, but could also, to I think your point, Andy, make it so you could extend it a little bit further to bring in external packages, and maybe even bring in things that you have locally so that you can do like a little bit more, not getting all the way up to like a full IDE or full editor, but kind of fit that space. Because I do think there is a gap that exists right now where it's like, well, I want to use this, but I want to import another package. And technically the playground does support it, but there's a lot of limitations around that. So if I could just have that locally and have this like little space be filled, I think that would be like great. I think it'd be kind of the equivalent of what Jupyter notebooks or Python notebooks gave for like a lot of data scientists and people like that, where it's just like, or what REPLs give for a lot of languages, where it's just like, oh, I can just start roughing things out. So it's like a little bit like a REPL for Go, but a little bit more robust.
Yeah, I've got a script that gets me pretty close. Like I have a very robust, like literally dev/scratch, right? And everything under Scratch, I mean, most things under Scratch is a single directory that's like has a Go mod in it, and it's just something I wanted to screw around with. And so I have like a script that like will create a new Scratch, like initialize the Go mod with the name of the directory, create a main format, and then open code and like drop me in there, and it'll jump to like the first line. That's pretty close.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
like,
There you go.
Should open
Have you
source
shared
that.
that with anyone? Yeah.
no, I never have. Yeah, I really
call it
probably
itch.
should.
There you go. Look at us doing UX work, uncovering gaps in the community, tools that apparently already exist, but Andy is hoarding them all.
I really want, I want Charm to make this, because then it'd be absolutely beautiful. But I also like another, I guess, idea of this. I wonder if you could just like integrate this into Go Please and have this be like a thing an LSP can do, so you could just do it from your editor. So your editor could open up a new window or buffer or whatever that's just like, boom, ready to go. And then you just start scratching it, doing all of that notating or whatever you're trying to do. And then choose to like save it or whatever, get rid of it. Maybe it like keeps stuff around for a day or whatever. You can
Yeah,
configure
that'd
it,
be
and
nice.
it garbage collects. Like you could really integrate this, but that would be a real nice thing, because then all of the editors that already integrate Go Please, it's like, oh, it's already there, so it can work. So you don't have to go into some other editor or go into some other thing. I mean, it's kind of easy to do this on the command line, because you just be like, oh, what's your editor? I'll run it for that. But if you're using like VS Code or Goland or whatever, it might be a little bit more difficult. So.
I'll have to bring
LSP
this to the Go Please team.
Yeah, we're just pitching things we want to Alice now.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Bit of a bait and switch.
Yeah, at the tables have turned. You thought I was joining your show. You're joining mine.
Oh, we just research people.
Yeah.
The Go backwards compatibility promise is an interesting UX constraint that you have there. But what about patterns? And that's one that we benefit from a lot, of course. But what about patterns that we don't like, or common mistakes people make when they are building developer tools? Any of
One
them?
second. I might be losing this room.
Okay. Just tell them you're on go time.
Do you have the room reserved? Yeah. I didn't realize it was going to be. Okay, thanks.
They can do the meeting on the show.
That was the other researcher apparently had this room booked,
Ah.
but was kind enough to find another one. Sorry,
Oh,
your
very nice.
question. Yeah, your question was actually, that reminds me. So now I should probably try to reserve this for longer. But your question on backwards compatibility. Maybe say the last sentence again.
Yeah, it wasn't the best link I've ever done. But I was just
All
saying
right.
that the backwards compatibility promise that you have that extra constraint on the user experience. Of course, you have to always bear that in mind. And usually we have to live with our legacy decisions. That's a great example of that. But I was interested in what mistakes we can do, or what mistakes happen a lot, or things we can do to avoid them, if there's any common sort of pitfalls or bits of UX that we don't like. We talked about the cookie one as well. I think another is where products add loads and loads and loads of features, and then yes, it's more powerful, it can do all these things, but it actually becomes harder to use because these features are now sort of in your way if you don't need them.
Yeah, and then you might have to deprecate them, and that would violate some kind of, somebody's expectations.
It annoys me, doesn't it?
Well,
Not that-
orthogonality, right, is important.
Yeah.
With if you can have so many features that have so much overlap, and then
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can do is not add so many features to begin with. So I understand the desire to just keep building things. And there's, like, building things is fun. Like, building things are really cool, and people like new features, right? And so there is a lot of a desire and drive, even, internally and externally, to build more features. But you really have to put a very critical lens before you before you build something. So one little allegory we like to give is if you ask somebody what flavor of ice cream do they like, or what kind do they, what flavor should we have available, you're going to hear every single flavor. Everybody wants every flavor of ice cream that you can conceive of. All right. But like, you can't just give everybody whatever flavor of ice cream they like. You might have to limit this to like, what are the top three? What are the maybe you go by preference. Like, maybe you also go by, okay, dietary restrictions. Like, this is a common allergen, so maybe we don't use the peanut one, or maybe we don't have, or maybe we have a dairy-free option as well, right? So, like, you can put different kinds of criteria on how you select for what features or things you're going to make available. And part of it can be accessibility, part of it can be what is the core task of the tool. It can be helpful to just really focus on to the core, what we like to call them CUJs, but you can also think of them as like jobs to be done, user journeys, things like that. You have these like core tasks that you want your tool to be able to do, and you want that tool to do those things as good and like have the smoothest, most frictionless experience like possible for those core things. And you can sort of limit some of that other stuff, because if like somebody's like, oh well, I really want to be able to do this, and it's like, yeah, I know you want to be able to do that, but that's not what this tool is for. That's a different tool. And you can happily go build that tool. We would love that tool to exist. It's just not our tool. So there are ways that you can do that. But yeah, I mean, I do see that happen all the time with feature creep. Is it can do everything.
Yeah, so I have a couple of really interesting things that you made me kind of think about there. The first thing that occurred to me is like, I think there's also like a temperance that comes in with that comes with the experience to a degree. I mean, I think everybody craves that the kind of joy of forging forward new creation and stuff like that. But like the more that you do this kind of work, like I used to be a big Perl developer, and I couldn't tell you the number of times that like they would start something, add some feature, and then like, oh no, that has some weird cross side effect thing, we're deprecating it, right? So this thing that was like this new core shiny feature that I loved so much, like 2 releases later it would be deprecated, and like then eventually it's removed because it just had too many side effects. Over time you start to realize that like once you the more things you add, the less orthogonal they are, the more complicated things become, and very quickly like the in a Frankenstein sort of way, the joy of creation can turn to like horror, right? But
I do think there's something in that, also thinking about what problems can be solved in user land, and is there something you can do which unlocks a lot of other capabilities. That definitely resonates with me, where if you can enable, you really, with developer tools especially, trying to enable people to do things, is there something you can do in your design to enable more of that? And that's just a worthwhile question. It's nice to solve your specific problems, but if you can find an abstraction that just fits perfectly there, I mean, that's really the gold. That's when you struck gold.
I have an analogy I feel like might also fit here, where I feel like features are a bit like sugar or fat, where like you need to have them, right? You need to have them to live, but the delivery method of them is what matters the most, right? You want to make sure it's balanced. You don't want to have too much of it. Sometimes it might be good to deliver your sugar as junk food, and we all kind of like that, but you can't make your entire diet out of junk food, or you don't want to make your entire diet all sugar or no fat, or like remove all the fat and only have sugar. And I feel like features are quite a bit like that. And I feel like, especially for like the old model, like before we had this nice subscription model where you had this nice stream of like, we can slowly give you features, and you had the big bang thing, you had to like really put in a ton of equivalent sugar and fat into that to get people to actually want to eat the thing, because it was like such an expensive purchase, as opposed to like these nice subscription models where it's like, okay, I'm paying for over time now, but now the company doesn't feel the need to kind of push all this extra stuff on me to incentivize me to consume it.
Yeah,
I have a
that's
question.
that's really. Oh, go ahead,
Well,
Andy.
it's for you. It's for you, actually.
yeah.
It's so. Here's the thing. I was thinking about this recently because I think, creating new features is great and everything, but, to use the food analogy, like you can spend your life like perfecting, an omelet or like something very simple. And I think, it's easy to forget that there's like a lot of work that can go into like very subtly adjusting and perfecting like a tool that you really have no intention of like adding a whole bunch of new features to per se. And I was wondering like if you have any experience. I think Go is a wonderful example of that, actually, because like we have this language that has by many accounts of positive features, right? But nonetheless is still undergoing like constant refinement in areas like say type parameter inference and stuff like that, right? So just wondering like what you have to say about that, like especially working on the experience of a language that is so static.
Yeah. So let me see if I can kind of get an idea what your actual question is. Is like how do we balance that, like the new features versus perfecting old features
Well,
or
that and
existing
like
features?
the
Or
amount
how
of
do you
like,
allocate your time?
yeah, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're always going to try to make the things better that we do well, right? That's like we do well here and we want to keep doing well here because this is kind of like our core. It aligns with our core design philosophy. It aligns with our like core values and what we want people to be able to do. So that's going to be a thing that we always work on. When it comes to new features, really, part of it comes down to what is going to something that Kris said is like how to unlock people and different kinds of, I think it was Kris was talking about this, like how can you unlock different capabilities, but also sometimes it's not about building new features to get new users or new use cases. Sometimes it's just removing friction from the existing tool or existing feature. Just remove some friction there. Like, what if we just made this feature a little easier to discover or a little easier to use? And so in that case, sometimes you are iterating on, that particular thing, that particular feature. You are iterating on that in a way that makes it, you're unblocking people from using it. And instead of building a new thing, because actually what I find is that it's not just new features that attract people to a tool or a product, a thing. How easy is it to get started or how easy is it to build, right? It's that experience, not just the like, oh, but I can, and this one lets me do this, it's like, you're probably like, maybe you'd buy that tool, but are you going to use it? Like, probably not. It's the things that makes it easy, not the thing that does all the things.
I feel that's like spicing or roasting your veggies. It's like, they're good for you. They don't have to taste terrible, and we should figure out how to make it so people actually want to consume them. And not
you can actually just like really do your veggies just like really well.
Yeah. Good idea. Well, speaking of doing your veggies really well, it's time for Unpopular Opinions.
Unpopular opinion.
I actually think you should probably leave.
Unpopular opinion.
Well, we have a great panel today, aka Alice, Kris, Andy, literally A.
It's
yeah,
literally.
it is that. Who wants to go first? Alice, have you got an
Yeah, I have so many, but I will share one because got to fit them all in. I have an unpopular opinion about self-driving cars.
Okay.
And some people think self-driving cars will be great and they're going to save us all. Some people think that it's part of a technical problem to solve. I think that self-driving cars are just a bad idea because they're not actually solving a real human problem.
Aren't they?
No, I think that for people who like driving, you're taking away their driving. And for people who don't like driving, you can also invest in public transit.
Yeah.
So there's really no, like, I can't think of, like, either you drive or you don't. But either way, it's not really not solving a core user need there. We have alternatives.
People that like driving, though, in the self-driving cars can get one of those Apple Vision Pros and can play, like, Asphalt 8 or something, and they can be driving.
While they're driving.
Well, that exactly.
I mean, but, like, that's not, like, a real human need, though. Like, that's not, it's just not, that's my argument. It's just, like, there's no real need. It's just, I mean, definitely it will, generate lots of data. It'll, increase car dependency. It'll, like, definitely make a lot of money for someone. Yeah. But I just don't think it's trying to solve a real human need.
Yeah, that's an interesting one there. That's a tough one to argue with, but that's not going to stop us. Does anyone want to dispute that?
I mean, I've always thought of it as kind of like an unfortunate stopgap. Like, I mean, if we want to get utopian about it, first of all, like most of this whole country was designed thinking that gasoline will be cheap and plentiful forever, right? And like everyone will have a car and it will be great. And then, so now we've got a lot of these like kind of sprawling, especially outside of some of the major like metropolitan areas, we've got a lot of sprawling area, and I always thought it would be nice to have like a public funded sort of like roving fleet of self-driving vehicles that you could just have come and pick you up and drop you off at the doctor's office.
Like a train?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, except for the fact that like not everybody lives near a train station.
Yeah,
especially as
mobility
mobility
that
decreases.
Last mile. It goes the last mile to your house. That's the
This is a solvable problem, though. You just build more train stations.
I mean, yeah, but how easy is it to like
everyone's house
retrofit an entire country versus like? I mean, I agree. I think it's ideal that we build like trains everywhere, right? But like in the meantime, I think that like it could help to have something like that. That's all I'm saying.
We retrofitted this country to be car dependent. Right, like we went back, like we were a train-dependent country, and then we were just like, now let's go try this automobile thing.
Well,
which has been just a massive failure, and now we're kind of trapped with it for a bit.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Stopgap only.
Yeah. See, we got to break the backwards compatibility for car dependency here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, because there are a lot of real dumb things about car dependence in America. Like I've just watched, there's this YouTube channel called Climate Town, and they had a video that came out, I think yesterday, really great on parking minimums in the country and how the entire idea of it's just BS, and they've done no real studies, and they're just kind of like, we're just gonna pick some arbitrary numbers to decide how many minimum parking spots you need, and how it's not just like turning giant spaces of land into asphalt for no reason. It's also like making us destroy buildings that we don't need to destroy, making so entire areas of town are just devoid of business, not because people don't want to do business, but because they can't afford to build parking lots. And it's like increasing the cost of things in some cases by like hundreds of millions of dollars just to have this freely available parking. And I feel like the thing we should be doing is being like, okay, get rid of all of that free parking and just like get us as fast as possible away from cars. And I think maybe this is unpopular opinion, make it painful to live in suburbs, because suburbs are fundamentally unsustainable entities, and we need to get away from them. And we're not going to get away from them if we make it too easy for people to keep living in them. They will keep living in them. Also, that could help solve some of our racism problems. That's a whole entirely different story.
Oh man, I'm so happy I brought out such a divisive opinion. I'm just enjoying this.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would like to see more of in cities is fewer cars, yes. More zip lines. There's a lot of...
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
Places that are very accessible with zip wires. As long as we get over this nanny state, kind of worried about people falling
Plummeting.
to their doom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live on a hill
Ooh.
that is
Prime
close to
spot.
another hill. It would be great if we could just zip or gondola if you want to be a little safer. Gondola over to the other hill. It would be
You know,
great.
there's nothing like a nice like cucumber sandwich in a gondola to like really
There you go.
convey yourself in style.
Yeah, it'll be the next big skyline addition to Seattle. I think will be the Capitol Hill Queen Anne gondola.
I think
You heard it
those-
here first.
They're just too slow, those things. I get it, you know, Andy, you strike me as a gentleman like from the 50s. You like to sit down and have a nice sandwich with the crusts cut off. And high noon and all that stuff. He's somehow posher than me, and I'm British,
I knew.
isn't he? High tea.
I mean, if you want to go fast, Matt, you just take the subway, right? You take the gondola when you want to, like, you have
Yeah.
a little bit of time. You want
Have a
do
drink.
something scenic. Yeah.
Zip wire. You can have a can on the zip wire on your way down,
Yeah.
and as long as you drink it quick, because you can.
Yeah, so you can definitely you can. Well, there'll be a zip too. Either or. Yeah.
Because the other one is catapult.
Yeah.
That's the one we've not really explored much.
The wire
But,
budget's just going through the roof on this.
Yeah, I mean, they tried a trebuchet and they
Yeah.
just.
Just want that.
know-
You just want to be able to go to your local one. You just strap in. It's like, right, everyone ready? Yeah. Okay. You go into Euston Station. Off you go. Pull the thing. Flang. You go flying through the air. There's a net and all that on the other end to catch you, and you just or you get caught in big funnels. And then you just go down these tubes.
Checking your watch on the way down.
Yeah. You can have a
You know,
drink.
New York spent a lot of money to get rid of all of the cabling and nonsense out of our skies.
Bring it back.
We should not bring it back. Just thinking about one winter with all the snow and all that stuff coming down, like, oh. Or, you know, it's going to be like icy one day and there'll be some fools trying to zip line all over the place. There's so many issues.
No, there's
I feel
definitely
like
something.
Andy had a comment about what I said, though. I feel like
Oh, you mean the suburbs thing? Yeah, I do. Like on the one hand, there is a part of me that like kind of deeply agrees with you and how the city layout is fundamentally racist in a lot of ways and all that sort of stuff. But like, and the other thing that it made me think of was like, you know, Judge Dredd, like not the stupid movie, but like the original comic was like, everybody like basically the world heats up and everybody goes into either these huge mega cities or they go out and they live in like the desert and, you know, eat people or whatever. And it's just, you know, I don't want to, even though I like, I mean, I live in like the suburbiest suburb that's ever suburbed, Columbia, Maryland, you know, shout out to the People Tree. But, you know, I don't want to like believe that. I want to believe that we can have like better, broader kind of public transit solutions that can work for like everybody, no matter where you live. But you know, it's hard to.
There's a middle ground too. It's like I'm not saying everybody should live in the city. Like no, I think we should just have like sustainable suburbs, the walkable suburbs, right?
Yeah.
Where
We
you
do
can,
have
like,
that.
walk and the thing I don't like is when you have like really spread out stuff and everybody has a yard for some reason and a lot of single family homes, like that's the stuff I'm like but if you have nice
Ohio.
walkable suburbs and like upstate New York, tons of places, I think if it's like a nice walkable place where it's like people should be able to live without a car in this country. Like most people shouldn't need to have a car. If you want to have a car, great. You want to drive, great. You should incur the expense of that. We shouldn't subsidize you. And I feel like all of the dumping of money into driverless cars is just like yet another thing to enable people to continue having cars when it's like, well,
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I was coming at it from the complete opposite direction. Like I was seeing it as not like a rich person or like make more cars, but as actually a way to have less cars.
yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, it will only. Yeah. It's not going to be possible for me to walk anymore when everybody's got a self-driving car that can just run me
that's
over.
true.
And like, how unfun is it going to be for me as a pedestrian when it's now illegal for me to, you know, cross the street because I might stop a self-driving car?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
or,
why you
let's
make
be
it
honest,
legal
you're not
to
stopping
walk.
any of those things. They're death machines.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah, no,
really
that's a
like
fair
to
point.
see like self-driving cars trying to operate in New York City. Like either they'd hit people or they just cause massive traffic jams. Either way, they'd probably get banned pretty quickly.
Yeah, you need to go
Or-
all in. Are cars an
or-
amendment yet?
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically, everybody's got the constitutional right to must own a car.
I just wanted to be put on the record that I'm not arguing for big auto here. Like, I just want.
Yeah.
Alice kind of was earlier by saying, well, no, you weren't, were you, Alice?
I think
Well,
she was
me?
arguing for a big train, right? Bring back the railroad barons. No, just kidding. Please
I mean,
don't.
you can have small train. I don't know. I was just in Europe
How
for
small,
the
though,
first
'cause you've gotta
time.
fit a lot of people in.
What do
You're
I
not-
can't say?
you
Oh,
might-
small train. Yeah, I
Might
mean,
be
I don't
fine
have
for
that
you, Alice.
problem.
Exactly,
You know,
that's
that's
not
a
fair.
that's a problem for people who are big. I don't know what that.
That's not very good dev user experience thinking.
Yeah.
Selfish.
No. I just mean, I mean, there is kind of like large, more like interstate or intercity kind of train, and then there's more like inner city, like within a city kind of
Yeah.
transit in that respect, and you can have more of one or the other. I think investing in both is a good option. Of course, then you can also have some competition for the airlines that way. Now I can get to LA or whatever, and I don't have to fly if I don't want to.
Big
I
catapult.
would love the vacuum zippy if that had actually really been a
Yeah.
The Hyperloop thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
You could do a lo-fi version of that with just vacuum cleaners and zorbing balls, I think.
Yeah,
just
go from
like the
Seattle to
worst.
San Diego.
Yeah.
Just
Just zorb your
Hop
way
in a
down.
bank
Oh, I'm
tube, right?
catching the zorb down to San Diego.
yeah.
It's so cool.
I'll be like, I'm going to GopherCon.
Everyone's zorbing everywhere. Yeah, I'm zorbing my way. Well, or travelators, or change all the sidewalks to be just travelators.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that
Powered
what they're
by-
called over there? I think we call them people movers over here. Anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, do you? People movers. I changed the
Ambulators.
sidewalks. We don't call it that. This is so difficult. I'm outvoted on what language I have to use today. So pavement, we call it, not sidewalk. So I would say turn the travelators into a pavement, or for the US edition, you might say turn the sidewalks into people movers.
movers.
I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do that accent all day. It's exhausting.
Yeah, pronouncing all of our R's. You know what? Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
You spend so much time doing that, though.
Not putting U's in random places, properly spelling things that have Z in them.
Yeah,
S and
Yeah.
Z are two different letters, Matt.
I agree. Yeah. So is Z.
I've actually almost forgotten my unpopular opinion.
Well,
Better remember
can we
it.
do a linguistics episode? I'd love that one.
Oh, there's
Me
a
too.
linguistics guy on TikTok that I absolutely love. He's the one that made me realize that in English, words that start with TR are pronounced like CH. So if you say choo-choo train, like you don't pronounce the T in train like T, it's ch, which is very weird when you think about it. Same thing with like trombone and all of this.
Trombone.
Yeah.
All ch ch ch.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
It's yeah.
It's a phonetic.
No,
It's actually dependent on
it's-
like the adjacent words and stuff like
Yes.
Yeah, it's because that's how we
Yes.
say T and R. You can't your tongue is in the wrong part of your mouth to go from
Yeah.
T to R, so we change how we pronounce
Yes.
the T. It's all
How do you
It's
say
fun.
Yeah.
burgers? I don't understand that word. Burger.
that. Burgers.
Burgers.
There you go.
Burgers.
I can understand it. I didn't realize you could speak properly.
You know, it is thought that British English used to have R's like American R's, and then you dropped them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're like the vestige
Ah.
of how English used to
And
be.
you're bringing them back and making them cool
Yeah.
again.
Non-rhotic. Is
Yeah,
new.
the non. Yeah.
Also, burger is a weird thing because it's just like we decided to break up a word, not where it's supposed to be broken up. Because it's hamburger is a sandwich from Hamburg, and we're just like, we'll just take off the ham and do burger because that's obviously how it's supposed
It's the American way.
That's like I think I was watching
It's
something
got
one
some
day.
very American sounds in it too. Like, that is very much an American
It
sound.
really is. In fact, the English R sound is one of it's a pretty rare sound across languages. Like I can't off the top of my head think of another language that actually has the same R sound we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good old America. I was watching a TikTok the other day where someone's like, "Oh, name an American food," and someone just said French fries, and the person just looked at them like,
Nice.
Like, okay. Anyway, we are way off track. Andy.
We are way
Yeah.
off track.
Just like a train.
Yeah, I actually have a hard stop coming up
True.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Well, yeah.
on the half hour.
All right. My unpopular opinion is that most programming fonts suck. I as much as like I love their design and I love to talk about design, I still like I get obsessed with a new one every like few weeks, but like I have just never found one that I can like really truly stand for very long. Like I have astigmatism, so like basically everything is just a little bit fuzzy to me, and so like I have to go to great lengths to make sure that like contrast and stuff. Anyway, once you start to make things out of vectors, like precision really does kind of go out the window. Hard edges kind of go out the window, and you have to like really increase your resolution and whatnot. And even then, sometimes like the difference of a single unit of screen movement can make something blurry or not, depending. Yeah, so
On the aliasing. Yeah.
but yet you turn it off and there's nothing that is built for being run without aliasing, and everything looks like garbage. So like there's a handful of fonts that I've used that are fine without aliasing.
Andy,
yeah,
do you tweet your font adventures?
I don't know. I should. Yeah,
What's your
I
Twitter
think the most recent one I was fascinated with, like if you've got a good like PDF with like your design layout in it, I'm a sucker for that, especially if it's got color chips, of course. But yeah, I think the most recent one I'm fascinated with was
color
Berkeley
french fries.
Mono, and
Oh yeah, mono. Yeah.
it's doing all right, but most of them suck.
Okay, nice. Well, we'll see. Most fonts suck from programming.
Yeah,
Programming
most
fonts.
programming fonts suck. Most of the dedicated ones that they say are good for programming, like we'll make it a little bit more unpopular.
All right, I got my hard stop right now, but
Okay.
thanks for having me on. It was lots of fun. I'd love to come back, and I feel like I have so much more content. Like,
Well,
I also have some follow-up questions for you at some point, if like
Yeah.
you want to go for Slack or something.
yeah,
Part two?
or email me, or I'm
Yeah.
pretty findable, I think.
Thanks, Alice.
So-
I'll do a little outro now, but you feel free to go.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
All right, I'll wrap up.
Oh, I don't get an unpopular opinion.
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Do you want to save it, Chris? Just don't have Alice here for her reaction now.
It's okay. It's okay. I have so many unpopular opinions, but my one for today.
Yeah.
Maybe this won't be unpopular, but I'm going to give a reason that will hopefully make it unpopular. I think that we need to abandon calling the science computer science, and we need to
Oh,
call it
this is a good one.
computing. Like, just no more computer science. It's a stupid name. Like, it's not the science of computers. It's the science of computing. And no other science calls itself something science. Not biology or geology or chemistry or physics. None of them. They're all like, we got our names. So we should just call it
Rocket
computing.
science.
Oh, and there is that, but you've reminded me of a beautiful anecdote. So a while back, I don't know what got me on this, but I was like, what is the history of the term like computer scientist and programmer? Like where did we come up with that? And so that's where my anyway, I went digging and I found the first mention of the term God, what was it? Software engineer or something like that, or programmer. I can't remember exactly what the first mention, but I thought it was an old letter to the editor for the ACM, where they were like talking about what to call people who do this programming thing, and there was this guy that wrote in with these amazing suggestions, right? And like tour engineer, tourologist, some really interesting stuff. And so I was like, but my favorite was at the very end was flow charts man with like dashes between each one. I was like, that's it. That's my new. I
And that's
love
your
it.
Twitter name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there is some prior art.
Yeah. I mean, I and like the reason, like I've been studying computing recently because I've also fallen down like another rabbit hole that maybe I'll do an episode about. I'm planning to write some blog posts and some articles around it. So maybe we can do episodes of that. But I've fallen because I asked myself the other day, I'm like, what does it mean to compute? Like, what is computing? Like, what is this thing that we do? And it actually turned out to be like a pretty simple answer. It's like, there's two things. It's like, something is computable if you can find an answer to it using computation, which is just an algorithm. And then there's also the complexity, which we all love to talk about and nerd out about, and be complete and all of that. Also, like there's this thing about feasibility of complexity where it goes into like, well, if you had an Earth-sized computer that existed for about the same time that Earth has existed, this would be the maximum type of problem you could solve with that. And I'm like, that is such a ridiculous but also nerdy way to like put the top of feasibility. But the kind of extension to that whole, like, we should go back to calling it computing, like one of the reasons I want us to do that, because I want us to remember our roots, because I feel like with AI, we've fallen into a thing we believed at the end of the 19th century, which was that it was possible that every single problem you could ask, every single question you could ask is computable, right? You can find an answer for it. And we got computing and computers because multiple people like Kurt Gödel, Alan Turing, Alonzo Church, like all of these different people all discovered in different ways how absolutely wrong that idea was. You can't, there are things that are uncomputable. There are questions that are unanswerable. And that, launched us into, what we have now. And I feel like there's a little bit of people believing this kind of, in the AI world, that it's like computers can do anything and they can do everything. And they're going to be these magnificent, all-knowing, all-intelligent machines. And it's like, we've been here and we proved that wrong. Like, there are significant limits to what is computable and what you can do with computing. And I want us to get to shift away from that thought and be like, well, let's try and figure out how to answer useful computable or actually computable problems instead of being obsessed with, this thing's gonna be able to take over everything. And maybe, that whole like Turingologist thing reminded me of how much I dislike Alan Turing ever since, I found out that the Turing test was a reaction to Ada Lovelace's assertion that like people are just going to be fooled by computers because they're kind of silly, which is what we figured out. And so I'm just like, if we're going to call it something, we should base it on what she said, because she was like 100 years earlier and also a brilliant woman. So we should love Letition or something like that. I don't know, but
Oh, there you go. That's a lovely candidate there.
yeah. That'd be epic, though, if you were just like, oh, what do you do? It's like, I'm a love Letition.
Yeah, that does sound like
I
someone
would
say
like
that at a party.
saying that, actually. I would put that on my business card.
Yeah,
Maybe now.
It doesn't sound like what you think it sounds like. I think, like, it doesn't sound like your job is coding.
It's better than being an aidist, I'll say that.
Yeah, that's. I do feel when I was thinking about like we should go back to calling it computing. I was a little bit like, computist? That's no. Like, I don't know what we'd call the people that study and do the science of computing.
Well, I mean, they just called them computers, right? That's what they were called back when computation was women's work, engineers.
Yeah, they were the computers.
But they were actually doing computation, whereas it's like, that's like, the computing is like the science of it. It's like I got into a whole I got a whole discussion with one of my friends about like, what is science versus applied science versus engineering, and it turned into this whole interesting thing that also might make an interesting episode to talk about.
We will see. But unfortunately, we genuinely have run out of time. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to our panel there. We learned, didn't we, about the developer experience, how important this is. Alice, I think a quote from her was, developers are people too. So we want to care about their experience as well. And we had a lot of food analogies. We talked about French omelettes, ice
Trains.
cream there. Yeah, fat and sugary features, spicing or roasting veggies. We talked a lot about cookies. And Alice, of course, mentioned automatic sliced bread. I never.
I'm
did.
sorry, Andy. Did you? He said food analogies, and you said trains, and I'm.
Well, I know. I thought we were going along the list of different sorts of analogies we had made.
Oh,
but no, he was
okay.
staying with food, and then I just threw trains right in the middle of it. It was awful, awful.
No, it's good. It's fine. I thought you meant like, here comes the train, choo choo. That's how you still eat.
Here comes the food train.
Yeah, that's the only way you
No.
can eat.
No, I thought.
You're in a
I
restaurant,
thought we
like,
were
don't look
listing
at
the
me.
analogies we'd done.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's good. No, good. Delicious. So, and we also had automatic sliced bread. We'd never found out what
very
that
good.
meant. Automatic sliced bread.
Oh, like the sliced bread that you buy.
Right, but what do you mean
Right.
automatic? The bread's not sliced itself.
I get
It
the
means
sense.
You're not
that-
slicing it. Like it's odd when it comes to you. It's already been. It's like
That's what
automatic.
sliced bread is.
That is, yeah. I think she was probably getting to like the, automatic sliced bread definitely sounds like one of those like
Sounds like a
UX
band.
in jokes, right?
Yeah, it
Like
does,
that.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's-
yeah.
We've had sliced bread. You just manually had to slice it. Like the innovative thing was that it came sliced already.
Well, yeah, the sliced bread is what makes it sliced. Is the fact that it's been cut into slices. I don't think
Yes.
the first one. No, the first.
Why
the,
are we
the
digging
best
on
thing.
this?
Well, the best thing since sliced bread. Let's assume it's the best thing, right? That's what
It's
we're
the best
talking.
thing since sliced bread. It's the best thing since like you could buy sliced bread, which is
Right, which was
automatically
probably cut-
sliced bread by
no,
some machine.
it probably
you
wasn't.
think you think we started selling sliced bread as like someone was in the back just slicing bread
Yes.
themselves?
Yeah, literally do. Yeah.
I hope
think
they don't
that's-
cut any of this out. Like I want every
Why?
podcast is gonna be-
They did that when I grew up, Chris. Even in my living memory, you'd go to the bakery, and then you'd order a loaf, and they'd slice it for you, and they just do it by hand sliced. None
But
of this
that's-
automatic sliced.
I feel like that's not like the innovation that's amazing. I feel like if you wanted it in the past, that would have been very expensive. So like the innovation is that anybody, even poor people, could buy sliced bread because you aren't having to do manual labor to slice it because it's a machine that's doing it automatically.
Yeah, it's the saying is it's the best thing since sliced bread, which was almost
Yeah.
certainly sliced manually. I think automatic
Why,
sliced
why
bread.
would that be like an innovation though?
I'm not the one that goes around saying that's the best thing since sliced bread. I don't really say that ever, because I don't think sliced bread's that good. Like,
Oh god, we're gonna have a whole episode
Nope.
on sliced bread now.
Nope.
yeah, if I accidentally buy a loaf, I stick it all back together, so it's just one big loaf again. I unslice it. I'm not having any of that.
Loaf purist, man.
Just make a big sandwich with it, many layers deep. So we learned about developer experience and why it's important, and we heard some great stories and some tips there. Thank you so much, Alice, Merrick, Andy Walker, and of course Kris Brandow.
Pleasure as always.
Pleasure's always ours. See you next time on Go
See ya.
Time.
Okay, but I just also looked up this sliced bread thing, and apparently started in 1928 by a company that sold sliced bread. And the thing they said is the greatest forward step in the baking industry since bread was wrapped.
Oh wow!
So there was a thing before sliced bread, which was wrapped bread. Which
Yeah.
And
It
before
makes
that, they were
sense.
just like wheat. Man, this
Yeah.
is good.
It makes sense though that when sliced bread came out, it was the best thing since something else. If that became the marker that we now use, wrapped is the best thing since wrapped bread. See, I'm going to start saying that.
Yeah.
That's
I'm just gonna be
better.
like, it's the best thing since
Was
we
the-
started milling flour. Honestly,
Was the bread automatically wrapped, Chris, or can someone manually wrap it and it still counts?
I have no idea.
What an episode!
Woof.
I have to drop, but this was great.
as do I. Thank
Yeah.
you very
No,
much.
we
so
should
much.
kill YouTube.